In the previous video, we looked at Latin America's experience with economic crisis. To contrast the Latin American experience, East Asia has shown success in both growth and crisis. Many East Asian countries like South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore showed remarkable growth since the 1960s. In the 1960s, South Korea was much poorer than some countries in Africa. More recently, other countries in the region, like China, Malaysia, Indonesia, India, and Vietnam, have joined the group of growing countries. The Asian growth success was due to a combination of industrial policy that was led by export growth, as discussed before in the course, and by business and government cooperation. However, there is also a high rate of domestic saving in these countries that helped with investment. They have also invested in education and rapidly improved education levels. Further, as discussed before, they believed in a high degree of openness to the world and this led to integration in the world markets. There are three main weaknesses in the Asian economic model: productivity, banking regulation, and legal frameworks. Productivity is not in output per capital input or labor input, but rather just by using these inputs more efficiently. This meant productivity is reaching its limits. Banking regulation refers to the Asian beliefs that banks are safe and that governments will bail out banks at any cost. Think of 2009 and the problems by bailing out banks that caused. The legal framework does not deal with issues of business failures and private sector failures. There was also an Asian financial crisis in the 1990s. This started in Thailand with the devaluation of the Thai baht. This was followed by speculations against currencies in the immediate surroundings of Thailand. It led to high interest rates in these countries to keep funds in the country, and the country's limited exchange rate depreciation to avoid large deficits. Indonesia was ultimately the worst affected country due to its political instability. At the end of the crisis, currencies in the region stabilized, but many countries maintained the capital controls that were put in place to deal with the crisis. The Asian financial economic recovery was described as V-shaped, a deep recession followed by a quick recovery, a concept that has again come up with the current pandemic and the economic recovery that is expected from this pandemic. There are four main lessons from these experiences for developing countries. First, choosing the exchange rate regime is important, and most these days prefer a flexible and floating exchange rate. In these crises, the role of central banking is important, and it should be independent and not be interfered with by the government. There should be proper reforms like corruption fighting, changes to the role of the government in the economy, and the lowering of trade barriers. Another aspect is contagion, and this came to the fore in 2009's crisis, when failures spilled from one bank to another through a network of transactions. There should also be a reconsideration of the financial architecture of the world. This means a reconsideration of the connections in the world market. These connections are the main cause of contagion and the risks associated with it. For developing countries, exchange rate stability is important with inflation control. However, this leads to a conundrum, since a fixed exchange rate with monetary policy independence mean capital control requirements. But this restricts international transactions, reduces efficiency, and contributes to corruption. For me, this is the exciting part of economics. There's no easy answer to how to develop the economy. Other measures that developing countries could take include more transparency, enhanced credit lines, increased equity capital inflows relative to debt inflows. This brings us to this week's conclusion. Is geography destiny? The idea of the geography as destiny became prominent due to a book by Jared Diamond, published in 1997, where he argues that the geography is the main determinant of economic development. This book book proposes that the orientation of the continent on which a country founds itself determines the climate, agricultural development, and ultimately economic development. I personally do not subscribe to his theory due to the technological developments that make growth possible in various ways. It also ignores ecological impacts that humans have on the environment that can affect development. Asimoglu, Johnson, and Robertson in 2001 furthered this idea by arguing that institutions like property rights were formed by geography in that where settlers were able to form settlements and avoid diseases carried by mosquitoes. In the regions where disease environment was low, investment took place and this led to economic development. I will upload this full paper on Ekambo. If you are interested in other ideas of institutions and how this affects the economy, please let me know and I can send you papers on this.